First of all, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. This is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. I know people who have been involved in crashes that have involved someone paying attention to something other than driving the car and resulted in some cases, some pretty serious situations. And also just the fact of coming to a Rotary Club, because I love speaking. I'll speak about this topic to anyone. But the thing about Rotary Clubs is not only are you all like just active parts of the community and everything, but you're also business and civic leaders and everything as well. And that's one of the things is I want this message to branch out and for people to share it with other people. It's just really, really important. It's an epidemic right now. And so that's why I'm here to talk about this. So distracted driving. Oh. There we go. Distracted driving is just one form of what I'll call impaired driving. Now, oftentimes when someone brings up the word impairment in driving, the first thing that comes to people's mind is alcohol or drugs or something like that. But impairment, the definition of impairment is the state of being diminished, slowed, damaged, or weakened. And of course, we all know alcohol and drugs and that type of thing impair. But with driving, the impairment is to the brain's functioning of information processing. And so your brain is only capable of doing so much, and if we do things that keep the brain from doing its job, then we end up having some issues and serious things can happen. So first I'm going to bring up 3 different categories of distraction here. The first one is what we'll call a physical distraction. And a physical distraction is basically something that takes your hands off of the steering wheel while you drive. Okay, the next one would be a visual distraction. And a visual distraction would be something that takes your eyes off the road as you're going down the road. And the last one is a cognitive distraction. And this is, they're all equally important, but this one is very significant in that it takes your mind off of the task of driving. And that's very, very important to make sure that our mind remains on the task of driving when we're rolling down the road. Here's a little infographic here, and you can see there's a whole bunch of different things: eating, drinking, personal grooming, roadside billboards, daydreaming, a whole bunch of different things. All of these can be forms of distraction, and you can see some take your hands off the wheel, some take your eyes off the road, some do both, but all of them take your mind off of the function of driving. So let's go over some different examples here. The first one would be, and of course this is first and foremost one of the most serious things for a lot of reasons, text messaging. Texting while driving is very, very significant thing. Just talking on the cell phone, and that's not necessarily holding the phone up to your head. It can be, completely hands-free, voice activated. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But any talking on a cell phone while you drive. Also, there's a whole plethora of other types of devices that we have in our cars. It could be the laptop, the GPS, the MP3, there are a whole bunch of different things. Okay? Also, just eating and drinking in the car, okay? Just instead of having the hands at 9 and 3, having the hands at maybe 9 and latte or, something like that. So, interacting with occupants in the car. And it could be kids, it could be friends, whatever, other people in the car. Interacting with them can be distracting. Yeah, that top one kind of looks like my daughter on the left at times when she was younger. Personal grooming, okay? And sometimes I hear the whole thing about, oh yeah, the ladies doing makeup, but I've seen more guys doing personal grooming than ladies in all of my years of experience of driving down the road, whether it's shaving or whatever. Doesn't matter. It's regardless of who's doing it, it's a very, very bad thing to do while we're rolling down the road. Reading, okay, it could be reading a map, it could be reading a book, it could be reading the newspaper, but either way, yeah, reading as we're rolling down the road, not a good idea. Adjusting vehicle controls. Now, we have to adjust our vehicle controls, right? If it starts to rain, we want to make sure we turn our windshield wipers on. So let me make sure to clarify this. But sometimes what can happen is we get so into adjusting the vehicle controls, and oftentimes it has to do like maybe with a GPS system in the car, or even putting in the radio or a playlist or putting in music, whatever, that can actually then, cause a distraction from us to actually drive our car. And distractions outside the vehicle. I got a kick out of this picture, so I edited it in. But yeah, there are so many different things that can distract us. And again, we want to make sure we're aware of what's going on as we're rolling down the road and what's going on around us, but we don't want to focus on just that. We have to be aware of it, adjust our driving situation, but we don't want to just completely focus on that. Here's some statistics. So 3,154 people killed in 2013, and those are from distracted driving crashes. And yeah, if you average it out, more than 8 people per day, and this is in the United States. 20% of teens and 10% of parents admit to extended multi-message text conversations while driving. A lot of people want to point the finger at those teens, okay? It's not just the teens. The teens are part of it, but pretty much just about every demographic of society is admitting to this. And I'm going to say, because of something I'll talk about a little bit later on as well, these numbers are probably pretty low. 25% of teens admit they will respond to a text at least once or more every time they drive the car. Yowzers. 71% of teens have sent a text while driving. In other words, not at a stop sign, not in the parking lot or something like that, but while they're physically rolling down the road. At any given daylight moment in America, 660,000 drivers are manipulating some type of electronic device while they drive. And again, some of these numbers, I think they're lower. I know some of these definitely are lower just because some of the statistics nationally that we don't have 2016 or even 2015 statistics yet. We're going back to 2014, 2013 in some cases. And 80% of all crashes report a distraction event within the previous 3 seconds prior to the crash. 8 out of 10 crashes. That's just a huge, huge number. There's also some research to kind of go along with this. The University of Utah, by the way, the University of Utah has been on the forefront of researching this, and they're just a great, great resource. They have all kinds of amazing things online on the internet to look at. So this first study, what they did was they studied people talking on the phone, and it didn't matter whether it was using the handheld phone or using a hands-free device. And they found that the driver reaction delay is equal to a blood alcohol concentration of 0.08. So someone driving in a car under the legal or over the legal limit of drunk driving, just talking on the phone while you're driving, there's about the same amount of impairment to the brain. And they're 4 times more likely to crash than a non-impaired driver. Now, texting gets even worse. Driver reaction delay is 2 times as much as someone who is talking on the phone, and they are 8 times more likely to crash as they're rolling down the road. And by the way, these pictures are actually from the University of Utah, from their research center. What they do is they actually have some of their own staff, but then they take students from the college and just say, hey, will you come in and do some studies for us? And some of them are, these 2 here are in simulators, but they even have some where they have them drive around the car and they hook up little things and they can see what's going on in their brains. And then they keep track at different times. This happened. Well, here's what was going on in your brain. It's very, very cutting edge stuff. Some more research, and this is brand new that came out within the last few months. The AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety shows that even voice-activated command systems in cars have significant negative impact on information processing and decision making. So it doesn't even have to be the phone. It can be just voice-activated systems. For example, in our cars, we can now, just through Bluetooth or whatever, we can tell our car, oh, please dial whatever number, and the little thing will dial the number for you. Now, here are some really scary numbers here. When using voice-activated systems while driving, the mental distraction on the driver lasted for up to 27 seconds, and this is after the task is done. So after they gave a voice command to make a phone call, to send a text, or to change the music. It wasn't until sometimes 27 seconds later that their brain was all the way back to being able to focus on driving. Now, here's what I'm going to call the multitasking myth. Now, we all have the ability to multitask in very small amounts, but we can't perform, multiple tasks at the same time except for the most basic. So yeah, I can walk and chew gum, I can tap my head and, do this at the same time. But yeah, when it comes to more complex things, we're just not capable of doing it. And what happens is the brain handles tasks sequentially, and then it switches from one task to the other. And our brains engage in a constant processing task. First of all, it selects information. Okay, what am I going to actually pay attention to? What's the gateway here? They process that information, they encode that information, and that actually creates the memory in our brains. They store that information after it's been created as a memory. And then after that, and so this is all just kind of bringing in information into the brain. Now, they also have to retrieve information that's been previously stored. And the brain also needs to execute or act on that information should the situation arise. And when our brains are overloaded, this process is disrupted. Now notice number 3, encode, creating memory. That's one of the key parts there's a problem with when we're trying to drive and we're distracted at the same time. So here's that encoding stage. And you can see from the picture down below, the one on the left is what's really happening, but the one on the right is what the driver might see. And what happens, the brain automatically filters information from overload. It filters that out, okay? And we don't have any say in it. The brain just automatically does it. And the driver is unaware of that information that gets filtered out. The information then, of course, doesn't go into our memory banks, and then the driver can miss critical information on potential hazards, okay? If this light is red, maybe that's one of the things that's filtered out. Very, very common. You hear these crashes that involve distracted driving, and the driver says, I didn't see the red light. I didn't see the stop sign. I didn't see that person pull out in front of me. I didn't see that child on the bike. And that's what's happening, is the brain is filtering out this really, really crucial information while we're driving. So, why do people do this in the first place? There are some reasons. Okay, first of all, busy lifestyles leading to increased attempts at multitasking. We all have a lot of things to do, and we only have certain amount of time, limited amount of time to be able to do it. And so we're trying to be creative and to get as much done with the amount of time that we have. Not a bad thing at all. Job requirements in some case. I know my brother-in-law sells insurance, and sometimes on the road, you have a client call or whatever. If you just ignore that client, that's not going to help your business, okay? Instant gratification of connectedness. There's a whole nother talk that could go into this, and this is also, as far as cutting edge research, they're finding like what's happening when you've got your phone there and you hear the little ding of a text or an email that comes in, your brain releases a little bit of dopamine into the system. And some people even talk about the fact that all these gadgets that we have can even sometimes, what some people would say, really kind of lead to addictive types of situations. I'm not going to go that far, but there's definitely that connectedness, that instant gratification. And there's a low risk perception, and it's reinforced when we get away with it, okay? Hey, I did this, but oh, nothing bad happened. I talked on the phone as I drove the car. I didn't get into a crash. That's all good. So then if a person does that, then next time they're more likely to continue in that same behavior. Now here's where we talk about what can we do about it. Okay, and the first one is absolutely key for every single one of us, is for us to lead by example. We all have a part to play in reducing distracted driving. This is a public safety issue. It's not just a teen driving issue. It's not just a, whatever. It's a vast public safety issue, and it doesn't, not only for the people who drive cars, but also for pedestrians and people on bicycles and stuff, anyone in and around the roadway. Second thing is public education, and that's part of the reason I'm here, and I'm so glad you chose to have me here today. Just educating. A lot of people don't realize the dangers here. Legislation, okay, when we talk about up on Capitol Hill and passing laws, okay, very, very important. Law enforcement as well. Now, obviously, this comes as a result of the legislation, and in some states, they have done these campaigns, and they do all kinds of research before and after the campaigns, and they find that high visibility law enforcement works. In other words, if they say, we are going to conduct a campaign on this, and then they follow it up and have the officers there and pulling people over, it could be a full month-long campaign or whatever. After the campaign is over, and then they talk to people, the numbers actually go down significantly. And number 5 is technology. Okay, there's technology. Ultimately, all this technology that we use, the iPad and cell phones and everything else, it's really good stuff. There's nothing inherently bad about it. It's how we use it in the car. The good thing is there are some technologies, even like you can download apps onto your phone that when it detects that you're going a certain speed will automatically keep your texts and your emails and stuff from getting downloaded onto your phone. And then as soon as you stop, it'll bring them up. So there's all kinds of different types of technology that is available. And as I'm talking right now, there's even more technology being developed. It's just going to continue to grow. And at that point, then, I'll just open the floor up to any questions if anyone has any. Yes?
So Mike, we know that states like California have laws that prohibit you from actually using a handheld device in your hand. It has to be hands-free.
Yes.
Do you know why Minnesota hasn't gone that route? Has there been talks about following that?
Yeah, I'm not personally involved in the legislative aspect. AAA does have lobbyists, and that's part of their deal as far as advocating for traffic safety issues. I'm not immediately and directly involved in that, but it's all a process. Every state has their own certain things, and it has to have someone who gets behind it and is going to have some passion for it and promote it and communicate it. I have a feeling it's just a matter of time. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point over the next 10, 15 years, maybe talking on the phone in general will be outlawed. And I know you mentioned handheld device. A lot of states have a ban on handheld devices, and in some places, like only in certain cities or certain situations, a ban on handheld. But also to keep in mind that when it comes to hands-free or handheld, the risk is about the same. And sometimes in saying, oh yeah, we're going to ban handheld, it's encouraging people to still use the hands-free, but it really doesn't reduce any risk.
I have heard that to carry on a conversation with someone in the car does not pose the same risk.
Yes.
Why is that?
You know what? Again, I'm taking this research and I'm just presenting it. I'm not the one who does the research, but the University of Utah, there's a doctor by the name of Dr. David Strayer, and he's kind of in charge of all of this type of thing. And what they did was they actually did, in their research, they saw the difference between someone communicating via phone in the car and then someone communicating with just the person sitting next to them. And for some reason, it was the distraction profile on their brain was completely different. There's just something about the generation of speech when the person isn't in the car with you. So yeah, very interesting. It's a completely different profile though.
Lots of car manufacturers are making all these hands-free devices.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And so are there, is it better? It doesn't seem like it's better than a handheld.
It's not. And it's being promoted as being more safe, and it's really not. I mean, I can remember when the cell phone companies back in the 90s were starting to come out with all these little hands-free. I remember my phone, because before I learned this stuff, you bet I talked on the phone while I drove. No one ever said, hey, it's not a good idea. But I remember they had a little button. You'd push a little button because there was a little cable, and it would be hands-free. And I still had to have my hand pushing that, but my phone wasn't up to my face. But they promoted these things for so long, even Bluetooth devices. It's so normal now to see people, and they got their little Bluetooth in their ear and everything as they're rolling down the road. And also, for years, the cell phone companies knew about the dangers, but it wasn't until like Freedom of Information Act and everything kind of said, hey, we need to release this information. They realized that there really wasn't any significant change in risk versus handheld or hands-free. It's all about what the public perceives and not necessarily on what's actually true. Yes?
So, I have a sense that some people are just all by themselves without distractions, pretty good drivers, and some people all by themselves without distractions are not very good drivers. I'm wondering if there's any changes in education around driving that's taking into account technology and all the things that are happening, so that perhaps people are better prepared to manage these things, knowing that they do exist.
Yeah, I can only speak of it from the perspective of the driving school that I work at, over at AAA Minneapolis. But we definitely, this is a very major thing that we talk about. We spend 2 days out of 10 days of classroom, and we re-emphasize it on day 10 as well, as far as the dangers of all of these different impairments while driving. I can't speak to what other schools do, but if you look through and see what they have on their websites or whatever, yeah, a lot of places are presenting the dangers of distracted driving and texting, cell phone use, whatever, as well as alcohol, drugs, even drowsy driving. That's another issue as well that is definitely on the increase as well. But yeah, I mean, there isn't anything. I mean, there are some particular, laws that the state of Minnesota says, here's what a driving school has to teach. But of course, each school, as long as they follow within the parameters of what the law says, the schools, can address that however they choose to do so. Yes?
Mike, a couple of years ago, Minnesota passed the no texting law. Have we seen numbers decrease from that, or is it, you said you're actually...
Unfortunately, numbers are still going up, and that's just because there's such a proliferation of all these devices. I mean, just more and more and more people have them in their hands, and people, will still choose to break the law. To me, I kind of compare it to speeding. I mean, we've got the speed limits out there, but it doesn't take much to realize if you go the speed limit, the vast majority of the people are going right on past you and still breaking the law. And again, I think part of it is people don't realize how dangerous this texting and driving, or they think, oh, I can do it, it's okay. What I talked about earlier, as far as, if they kind of get away with it once, then they're more likely, and it becomes, kind of a lifestyle in a sense.
Well, I think your speech is a lot of propaganda for public transportation. You can text and talk away on public.
Yes. Well, and not only that, another thing, I mean, you guys have all probably heard of like Google cars and all these self-driving cars. Oh my goodness, I mean, maybe in 20 years I'll be out of a job because we'll all be having little computer-controlled cars or whatever, and we can text as much as we want. But yeah, again, technology just continues to grow just by leaps and bounds. And hopefully we can come up with some good solutions. And in the meantime, just to encourage people to not be tempted, because it's a real temptation. You hear the ding of a text message or something like that. Oh, who is it? Who was it? I got to know. It's a real temptation for us all. So, yes.
Mike, I'm driving down 169 today, just doing an errand, and I just did it knowing I was coming to this topic today. I'm looking to my left and to my right, and I'm counting the cars, every 5 cars, and I would identify that who was texting, who was talking on their cell phone, who was distracted. And 3 out of 5 were distracted. All the way down, I come back to Cedar and said, all right, now I'm going to talk to another 5 people. I said, I can't believe this. This is daytime, and these weren't kids.
Yep.
These are adults.
People want to point the finger at the kids. It's not just the kids. Adults are partaking now just as much.
Crazy thing about this, the gratification. I'm in Mexico, walking down a beach on Cozumel, and my wife and I love to take morning walks. And we'd go by this one resort where people had their feet in the sea, Caribbean Sea, and they had their iPhones talking to them the whole time when we're looking at them. Wait a minute now, you're in this beautiful sun, you've got your feet in the water, but the only thing you want to do is talk to someone and tell them where you're at, not get up and walk.
You can do that back here.
There were we see like 2 other couples walking this 20-mile beach that you could walk every morning, and that everybody else was sitting in the chair.
Yeah.
What is wrong with this?
Yep. And one thing I'd actually like to share with you guys here, I've got it up on my iPad, speaking of technology, right? I want to recommend a book, a gentleman by the name of Matt Richtel, and he writes for the New York Post. He's really, really good, and it's called A Deadly Wandering. And what it does is he takes a case that was actually in the state of Utah, a student by the name of Reggie Shaw, and he was texting, was involved in a very serious crash. 2 people in another car were killed. And it's the story of this whole thing. And I would strongly encourage it. Once you start reading it, I know for me personally, I couldn't put it down. But it's not only the story of what happened with Reggie and the whole legal system and all that, but also Mr. Richtel also interviews different doctors and stuff, like these neurosurgeons, these literal brain scientists. I mean, and they talk about what actually happens within the brain. And the fact that, why in the world would we be walking on a beach in Cozumel and want to have our phones up to our ears? And it talks about what actually happens within our brains. Fascinating. I can't even begin to give the same clarity that Mr. Richtel does in his book. So I can strongly endorse this book, A Deadly Wandering by Matt Richtel. So.